In this video, we're going to learn how to create links to data in other workbooks using workbook references. So just like we learned to create 3D references to reference data in other sheets, you can also reference data stored in other workbooks. This is very useful if you need to combine information from multiple sources in order to complete calculations. We call references to other workbooks external references. They are to cells or ranges within a workbook you are not currently working in. There's also some other important associated terms. The workbook that you are currently in will be called the destination workbook, whereas the external workbook that you want to draw information from will be called the source workbook. The external reference will make a link between the two. External references are very close to 3D references because they have the row address, the column address, and the worksheet name as well, the worksheet address, but they'll add in a fourth component. They also add the name of the workbook address to the source workbook. So in general, an external reference will have these four components. The workbook name enclosed in square brackets, the name of the sheet after that, the exclamation mark to separate the name of the sheet from the cell range, which is referenced with our letters and numbers for columns and rows. For example, if you wanted to reference A3 within a sheet called July that was stored in a workbook called Next Month, the reference would be nextmonth.slsx, the type of file extension for a typical regular Excel workbook, the name of the sheet July. Because there is a space between next and month, you have to use single quotation marks around both the workbook and worksheet names. Then you have your exclamation mark and the cell reference. If you did not have a space in the workbook name, you'd still need the square brackets and exclamation point, but the single quotation marks would not be necessary. If your source and destination workbooks are not saved in the same folder, then you need to also include the path where the workbook source is saved. So, for example, if you saved it on your desktop, on the C drive, you need to include that full path name, which can get quite complicated. So the fastest way to enter external references, so you don't have to worry about typing out the workbook names, the worksheet names, or the path, is to actually open up the workbooks you want to use, be able to actually click within the source workbook to select both the sheet and cell reference you want in any formula or function. We're going to do an example of this with an external workbook called Next Month as our source workbook, but just a couple quick warnings first. If you have both the destination and source workbooks open, then any changes made to the data in the source will automatically be updated in the destination workbook. So if you make some changes to data and they're used in a sum calculation or an average calculation, those calculations will automatically update when the workbook is open. However, you need to be careful with external links, and Excel doesn't automatically trust them. So when you're adding a link, Excel will ask you if you trust the source document. Once you say yes, every time after that, when you try to open up the workbook, you'll be prompted to update the links in the workbook. This little prompt will look like this. So you'll click Update to update with the latest data, or for any reason, if you don't trust the workbook or you don't need to update it, you could also press the Don't Update button. In general, we always want to use the Update button to get the most recent data. Next, we're going to look at that example of being able to use external references in order to find the total spending in April, which we've got in this sheet, May, June, and we want to add in one more sheet, which will be in a brand new workbook called Next Month, where we've got July, the next month's monthly total. Going back to my destination workbook, I'm going to start by putting in an equal sign and entering in sum to start my sum formula. I want to add together April, May, June, and July spending. First, we'll add together April, May, and June spending because they are stored within this workbook using our grouped worksheet 3D reference method. So what I mean by that is we'll click in April, press Shift, select to June, then press where the monthly total is stored in G3. After that, I'll enter a comma to say I want to sum these three cells, but also, if I go over to the next month worksheet, I also want to add in this one, next month, July. So notice the difference. Because April to June are stored within the destination workbook, I don't need the workbook name. I just need the sheet names and the cell reference G3. But once I go into a new workbook, I've got the name of that workbook next month, the name of the sheet July, and the cell reference within that worksheet G3. If I press enter, I go back to my original destination worksheet and I have the total amount spent in all 4 of those months. So the easiest way to get an external reference is definitely by making sure you have both worksheets open, then just clicking on the cells you want to add in to any type of formula and function. And that allows you to use data in multiple workbooks.